In the heart of the bustling city of Lagos, where the skyline rose like jagged teeth and the streets hummed with the rhythm of commerce, there lived a young girl named Adibimp. She was known for her quiet nature, often keeping to herself in the corner of the classroom at school, her head bent over her books, her mind consumed by dreams of faraway places. Adibimp's life was simple, yet it carried the weight of expectation. She was the eldest daughter in a family of 5, and though her parents loved her deeply, they hoped for her to follow in the footsteps of her mother, a strong and independent woman who had always been the backbone of the family. Her mother often told her stories from their homeland in Ibadan. Of great warriors who fought with the strength of lions, of women who held their heads high, regardless of the weight of their burdens. Courage, her mother would say, is not something you find in the muscles or the sword. It is in your heart, in the quiet voice that refuses to let fear keep it silent. But Adibimp struggled to hear that voice. Every day, she watched her classmates speak with confidence, make bold decisions, and step into the world as though it belonged to them. Adibimp, on the other hand, lived in the shadow of doubt. Even simple tasks, like answering a question in class, seemed insurmountable. She would stare at her books and wish for the courage to speak up. But the words always seemed to dry up in her throat. One bright morning, as Adibimp walked to school, the wind whispered through the city streets. It was a cool breeze, soft and teasing, tugging at the edges of her school uniform. She paused for a moment, feeling the breeze ruffle her hair, and then, as though drawn by some invisible force, followed it down the street. The wind led her through the crowded market, where vendors called out their wares, fruits, spices, fabrics, and beads, all infused with the vibrant energy of the city. The air was thick with the smell of jollof rice from a nearby food stand, mingling with the sharp tang of fresh fish. The sound of laughter, bargaining, and the clinking of coins filled the air. Adibimp was lost in the chaos, yet the wind seemed to guide her, pushing her forward. "Where are you taking me?" she murmured under her breath, half amused by the thought of the wind as a guide. As if answering her, the wind swirled around her and tugged at her gently, leading her toward an old, weathered house at the edge of the market. The house was small, with a tin roof that had seen better days and walls painted in peeling hues of blue and white. The door creaked as Adibimp pushed it open, and inside, she found an elderly woman sitting by a window, her face lined with age and wisdom. The woman's eyes gleamed as she looked up at Adibimp. "Ah, the wind has brought you here, hasn't it?" she said with a smile that seemed to hold centuries of stories. Adibimp blinked in surprise. "How did you know?" "I have seen many come and go, child," the woman replied. "And the wind always brings those who seek something, though they may not know what it is. Sit. Tell me, what troubles your heart?" Adibimp hesitated but then sat down on the wooden stool beside the woman. She wasn't sure why, but something about this old lady made her feel safe. She could tell the woman had known hardship, and yet there was a calmness about her, a quiet strength that Adibimp couldn't ignore. "I'm not like everyone else," Adibimp said softly. "I'm too quiet. I don't speak up. I'm always afraid of being wrong, of being laughed at. I wish I could be brave, like the others. But it feels like courage is something I'll never have." The old woman listened carefully, nodding slowly. After a long pause, she spoke. "Courage, child, is not a thing that can be borrowed or bought. But the wind." She smiled, her eyes twinkling. "The wind can show you the way, if you are willing to listen." Adibimp frowned. "Listen to the wind?" "Yes," the woman said, her voice soft but firm. "You see, the wind does not fear where it will go. It moves freely, sweeping through the trees, across the fields, through the cracks of the earth. It does not ask permission to be. It simply is. And in that being, there is courage." Adibimp stared at the woman, unsure of what she meant. But before she could ask another question, the woman handed her a small, smooth stone. "Take this," she said, "and when you find yourself in need of courage, hold it in your hand and feel the wind in your soul. Let it remind you that there is no obstacle too great, no fear too strong, if you learn to trust the strength within you." Adibimp held the stone, feeling its cool surface against her palm. She didn't fully understand, but something in the woman's words stirred a flicker of hope within her. She stood up, thanked the woman, and left the house, the wind still teasing her hair as she made her way to school. The next few days passed, and Adibimp kept the stone in her pocket, though she didn't quite know how to use it. It wasn't until a school presentation came up that the true test of her courage arrived. Her teacher had announced that every student would have to give a speech about their dreams and goals, and Adibimp's heart had sunk. She dreaded speaking in front of others, and the thought of being judged by her peers terrified her. As the day of the presentation drew closer, Adibimp's fear grew stronger. She couldn't shake the image of her classmates laughing at her, of her words stumbling out in a jumble. She clutched the stone in her pocket, the smooth surface grounding her in the moment. The wind was outside, whipping through the trees, and she felt a strange urge to step outside, to feel it against her skin. She stood at the window, looking out over the schoolyard, where the wind tossed the branches of the trees like toys. The breeze seemed to whisper to her again, urging her to listen, to trust. Adibimp closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and stepped outside. The wind wrapped around her like a cloak, and for the first time, she felt its power not as something separate from her, but as part of her. With the stone in her hand, she walked to the front of the classroom, her knees shaking. She stood there, looking at her classmates, and for a moment, the room seemed to spin. But then, she remembered the wind. She remembered the woman's words. Courage wasn't about being fearless, it was about moving forward despite the fear. Adibimp opened her mouth, her voice trembling at first. But as she spoke, something changed. The words began to flow more freely, her heart steadier with each sentence. She spoke of her dreams, of the things she wanted to achieve, of the people she hoped to help. The room fell silent, and when she finished, the applause was not just for her words, but for the courage she had borrowed from the wind. After that day, Adibimp's confidence grew. She no longer feared standing before others, for she knew that the wind would always guide her when she needed it most. She didn't need to be like everyone else, she only needed to be herself. The old woman's wisdom had unlocked something inside her, something she hadn't even known was there. Adibimp realized that courage wasn't something to be found outside, it was within her all along, waiting to be embraced. Years later, Adibimp became a woman of great strength and wisdom, known not for her loudness, but for her quiet resilience. She often returned to the market where the old woman had lived, but the house was gone, replaced by new buildings. Yet, every time the wind whispered through the city, Adibimp would smile, knowing that it had always been there to carry her forward. And so, in the bustling city of Lagos, where the skyline rose ever higher, there was a girl who had borrowed courage from the wind and in doing so, had learned to soar. If you enjoyed this story, do well to like and subscribe, as we get the next interesting story your way.